Today, on Economic Superpower, we will be looking at supply, demand, and government policy. The key idea to grasp when trying to understand why governments create economic policies is the concept of efficiency versus equity. As we have seen in our previous videos, in the free market, Adam Smith's invisible hand will guide the market so that it tends towards efficiency. However, in normative economics, the question we must ask ourselves is this fair? And is efficiency what is best for society as a whole? Sometimes the government will become involved in the market, especially in the case of market imperfection or failure, with the aim of improving the outcome. We know from Mankiw's principles that governments can sometimes improve market outcome and that people respond to incentives. But sometimes these incentives can lead to unforeseeable, even dangerous consequences. For example, a law in India that was designed to reduce the cobra population actually resulted in more cobras being bred by people who wanted to receive a reward for handing them in to their local authorities. Certainly, this isn't what the policymakers intended. Now let's look at a couple of different ways that governments can control supply and demand. In a perfect market, the market prices tend towards the equilibrium price. The equilibrium price may be the most efficient, but may not be fair towards certain sections of society. Consumers may not be able to afford the equilibrium price, even by emptying their purses, and intense competition may depress producers' incomes. Therefore, if governments want to change this, they may implement a price ceiling, a legal maximum on the price at which a good can be sold. There are two kinds of price ceilings. Some price ceilings are binding because the equilibrium lies naturally above the price ceiling, and so the price is prevented from rising that high by the ceiling. In this case, producers are less inclined to make more of their product, meaning that consumer demand is higher than supply, creating a shortage. On the other hand, some price ceilings are non-binding, meaning equilibrium lies naturally below the price ceiling. Non-binding price ceilings have no effect on the price or quantity sold. Price ceilings have both benefits and costs. Consumers who can now afford the product with the money they have, of course, benefit. But both producers and consumers also carry the costs. Consumers suffer from a shortage because there are more consumers than products, and unfair rationing methods such as queues, while producers are more likely to leave the market and less likely to invest in their products. Even policymakers can lose out, as they are forced to bring in new difficult and costly legal regulations. Another way government policies can control price is through price floors, by setting a legal minimum on the price at which a good can be sold. Like price ceilings, there are two kinds. The price floor may be binding if the equilibrium is below the price floor, artificially raising prices so that supply exceeds demand, creating a surplus. Alternatively, if equilibrium naturally lies above the price floor, it is non-binding and has no effect on price or quantity supplied. Unfortunately, price floors do also have issues, namely that the poor are most affected by them and have to break the bank to buy products they could previously afford. Apart from price ceilings and floors, government policy may affect market supply and demand through tax. Tax can be divided into direct taxes that tax an individual's income, or indirect taxes that tax businesses, who will then raise prices so that the individual indirectly pays the tax. There are two kinds of expenditure tax: specific and ad valorem. A specific tax is a fixed rate levied on a good or service as a sum per unit, say an increase of €2, whereas ad valorem tax is levied as a percentage of the price of the good, say a 2% increase. Specific tax makes it more expensive to produce a good, and so producers reduce the quantity supplied and raise prices by the same amount as the tax to compensate. Similarly, ad valorem tax increases production costs, reducing supply and forcing producers to raise the market price by the same percentage in order to profit. In both cases, we can see that the tax burden is shared by both the producer and the consumer. But what is the tax incidence? That is, how is the tax burden divided? Well, whichever group has greater elasticity and a good alternative to consuming or producing a particular good can leave the market and thus is less affected by the changing prices. One final way that governments can try to alter the market outcome is through subsidies. To encourage consumption or provide an advantage to the recipient, governments can grant subsidies by either providing more funds and supplementing income, or by lowering the cost of production. Subsidies affect supply, but not demand, meaning that producers, such as rail service providers, are willing to supply more of a product or service at every price. Both producers and consumers can benefit from subsidies. Consumer benefits include lower prices, as well as a more abundant supply of a good or service. For producers, subsidies can be beneficial as the extra income allows them to invest in their products. However, subsidies are also criticized for their costs. Subsidies are often financed by raising taxes, can drive down market prices, and favor large companies in developed countries rather than the little guy in the developing world. So what do you think? Tell us your opinions about government policies, supply, and demand in the comments, or by liking and subscribing to Economics Superpower. We'll see you next week for our next video. Happy studying!